Welcome to Pulp Mythos. I'm Brian here with Larry and Spencer, and we're going to be discussing the Wheel of Time episode number 4, The Dragon Reborn. If you've not hit the sub button, please do so. Leave a comment, leave a like, and tell us what you think about how this show compares to the book, especially if you're a book reader. Obviously, if you're not, then that doesn't matter. But yeah, this whole episode is basically revolves around Logain. We get him at the beginning of the episode, and he's sort of the main driving force throughout it. And then in the end, and Logain is they dub a false dragon. But there's a lot of interesting things about him, and especially the power that he possesses. He seems way stronger than most men who can channel. Um, I want to start with that portion of it, specifically Logain, the false dragon. You guys, or Spencer, you're starting the book. Larry, I believe you're about to start reading the first book. Um, it is interesting to note The Dragon Reborn is the title of the, I believe, third book.
Yes.
So that was interesting. But yeah, sort of the Logain plot line. We get a cool battle at the end. We get his
It's
followers. There's a lot of lore. I mean, this whole episode was just like teaching you everything about their world through sort of that story.
You mean almost like D&D campaign?
Yes. Because you have because in capturing him, you have a little more about the Aes Sedai. So you have, okay, well, now we know there's politics involved. Oh, now we know they have a system. They wear different colors that coordinates with what their role is in their organization. We know that they don't all agree on how things should be. We know there's, somewhat of an issue going back to the tower. Like we're getting all of this lore. We learn about gentling, as they call it, where you can sort of tear a man from his connection to the one power. Um, that can also, well, slight spoiler to the books, that can also be done to women too, by the way. We get, like I said, a lot with Logain and him building this army and him believing he is the dragon and he's important and he's got all this stuff going on. We learn more about the wards. We get a closer look at how they operate and how they connect with their Aes Sedai and how it's a family and it's a unit and they're legitimately connected in a way. But yeah, go wherever you want to start. Like I said, there's just so much packed into these episodes. I don't even know where to start.
What? I just wanted to start with a slight comparison to the book because this isn't a spoiler thing, but it ties into Perrin. And I haven't got far enough to spoil anything yet. But the wolves that have been kind of coming and going, the whole town sees that as a much bigger red flag than what they show in this show. So, as this episode's progressed, when you're learning more about Perrin, and for lack of a better word, they're gypsies, the traveling people. Like, it's very much what it feels they're drawing the comparison to.
The Way of the Leaf.
Their whole story, because I fear we could cover their story quicker than we could
Yeah, we can jump into there. And the song, the song that'll unite all, and parents sort of trying to figure out, they're pacifists, hardcore, to the point of they'll either run or die. Like
because
they are hardcore pacifists.
because they feel, as everybody does in this story, the basically reincarnation. Like they're gonna come back. It's basically they're gonna be reborn. The cycle just keeps going until the wheel is finally broken. This is what they feel is going to continue. So what they want to do is basically break the wheel, but in a way that everything continues and you don't have to be reborn anymore. That was what I was getting from their story. But uh, we're learning everybody's kind of powers and stuff. And it's funny that listening to the book, they actually call him a bard and a gleeman. So
Gleeman, yeah.
yeah, but they call him a bard in the book. So it was funny that we make all these D&D references, but they do in the book as well. But Perrins is the only character who I can't quite figure out what he is just yet. It I'm getting like druid vibes just because of the wolves and stuff, but I'm not 100% sure. Or because, like I said in the book, they kind of reference that the wolves are much darker omen almost. That if the reason they're not trying to eat him is because he's already been marked by the Trollocs. So I don't know if that's like a bad sign. I'm really confused about what his role is as of right now.
Well, it's funny you mention that because I feel like that whole section of the show with the people that follow the way of the leaf was less about Egwene and more about Perrin, and because it seemed like they were trying to guide Perrin in a certain direction, like they were trying to push him towards a degree of pacifism, or at least a more peaceful route than he may potentially go on. Uh, like, and I'm not quite sure how the Wolves play into it. Like, clearly that he has some sort of like power over or abilities related to the Wolves, and I I'm gonna say I maybe don't think it's related to the Trollocs because wolves seem a little too natural. It may be something that the Trollocs, like you said, him being attacked by the Trolloc, they may be perverting that ability in some way, perhaps, and maybe even through his teachings, through traveling with these people, he's able to fight that to some degree.
Yeah, the wolf thing is very interesting, and also interesting how every single one of sort of the main characters they're legitimately going on a journey and trying to discover themselves. Perrin's sitting here with these people who have a belief system that he's not really sure about, but thinking about the battle that he came from and the things that happened to him, he sort of think, well, maybe they're onto something there. You have Egwene, who's also, she's in love with Rand, but she's sort of talking to this dude, and she's like, "Hey, what's up?" And there's sort of a little something there going on. She now knows that she also possesses this ability, and that where could that lead her? You have, we'll save Matt and Rand for last because that's there's a lot to talk about there, and then you have Nynaeve. I think I'm saying it right. I constantly that just
You were closer than I ever would have guessed.
Nynaeve. She's hanging out with the wards. She's also, and we'll go, I guess, go into that now. Um, she's someone who's powerful. She's a leader. She's been a very important member of her, where she came from. And now she's starting to get a better glimpse of things outside of her village, how the world works, how these Aes Sedai operate. And she also, and I love the scene where she can just see right through the politics and the BS of some of them, and instead of hanging out with the sisterhood, and she goes and chills with the wards, and that was a really cool scene. They're all, just sitting around the fire, and she's sort of learning how things operate because she has sort of a bond to land at this point. We have the moment where, he's doing his little prayer, and she comes in on that, and you know gives a little bit about her past and the things she's been through. But the big finale of the episode is Loghain's people come in a really cool battle. They're trying to free him. He ends up killing one of the Aes Sedai. Her ward comes in, makes a stupid move, and man, everybody gets just blasted in that scene, and everyone's like on the ground dying. I mean, that scene was insane. And she comes in and has this very emotional response, and is able to generate and channel enough of the the one power, and heals everyone in the room. It's a very shocking moment. We're still trying to figure out who is the Dragon Reborn. It's sort of a interesting, and we have Loghain then gentled and the power ripped from him, which is essentially a death sentence to some degree, because when anyone who has access to the one power, if it's pulled from you, they typically take their lives at some point. That's a big thing in the books. So it's damn near a death sentence to have it stripped from you. But going into her character and all the stuff shit I just said, yeah, what are your guys' thought on her character's journey, or any of the characters' journeys?
There was a lot going on with her this episode, and it's the sort of thing like because we get you get the feeling from episode one that she views these people as enemies, and now she's in their camp, and like you said, just sort of palling around with them, and gets to see that they're actually even people, even the sorcerers. What is the group? What are they called? the sorcerers, not the
Uh,
wards, but
the Aes Sedai.
the Aes Sedai, yeah. And she seems to be a little more apprehensive about the Aes Sedai, but she's seeing a human side of them too, and that they're not, as monstrous perhaps as she was initially thought, and that, like you said previously, that there's different angles and there's different types of Aes Sedai. There's different divisions, and they don't agree. Like maybe some even agree more with her. Um, and what I found most interesting about her character is now we have, I think, a pretty clear confirmation that because you mentioned in previous episodes that they mentioned that there were five suspected people, that they suspected five of them as being the Dragon Reborn. It's clear now that she's one of them because, like, when she healed all those people that were near death or heck, even possibly dead, um, even Logain sees it, and you can see it on his face. It's like he's lost faith in himself and his idea that he is, because it seemed beyond the scope of his power to do what she was doing.
I think that's important too, because when you look at what her avatar state, like when she went into, but it was, you saw all the Aes Sedai, which they have the different factions, and I'm not sure what their main powers were, but you could tell that the green ones were basically the ones throwing like the bomb. No, the blue ones were the ones like throwing the bombs. They had like the explosive use of the one source. Like that's what they were doing, and each kind of faction has their own uh, use of the power. But when she came down into the cave area and healed everybody, it it did feel very Avatar state ish. But with all of them together, the Aes Sedai trying to contain uh, Logain, she came in, and to me that's my question, because they mentioned that not any one person uh, is as strong as everybody's use of the one power together. So was she able to, because they were all using that one source to try and get Logain, able to tap into that and draw from that and basically absorb all of that and then use it, basically like redirect it, because they were all using it to try and shield him and contain him. And she just basically took all of that and then redirected it. So just from my understanding of the books, they basically, it's like a D&D party where they balance it out. Who's to say that it's not just, who's to say that it's one of them that's a Dragon Reborn? Why can't it be kind of like a Shazam thing where it's all of them together?
Yeah, that's a possible, and I have a feeling, and it's funny you say that because I have a feeling that they're all, like, at the very least, if even if it's not all of them, that they're nearly on an equal playing field as far as power, which is why they kind of felt that, okay, it's someone amongst this group of kids is clearly one of them. They're all very powerful, and heck, they're all probably more powerful than Logain even, uh, potentially.
Yeah,
Like,
they
but
don't know how to use it yet.
right, they don't know how to use it, and they don't know which one of these kids is going to fulfill the prophecy, if any of them.
And they're very aware because they have that moment in the cave where they're saying Logain is the most powerful thing they'd ever encountered. And yet they're dubbing him the false dragon. He's not the one. And so they're, like trembling at the idea of, my God, what will the one be? But the big interesting thing is, okay, if Logain's not the one yet, why is he able to be so powerful? There's a lot of weird things happening, and magic, we'll just say magic users for the ease it, make it easy, but they're doing things that haven't been seen before, or at least seen in a long time. So clearly, that's the moment where they're like, "This is it. We think the end times are here because the signs are there. Shit's happening that we have never seen or recorded, and this is all part of that."
Yeah, yeah, and I'm curious in this world too because it's so strange. And there's the idea of the wheel and time repeating. What is an end times like for them? And and there has to be like extensive prophecy about it too, because they've
There
clearly
is.
experienced in times before.
I keep there absolutely is, and I'm like I said in the book they've rearranged a few things, and I'm assuming they're saving some things later. But yes, there definitely is lots of prophecy. Now here, well, I don't want to say that. Never mind. um, we had the barn. Um, Now this has people debating it online because there are elements of this that are not the book, and so I want to know what you guys think happened. We had Matt, Tom, and Rand end up in this barn, and there's a nice family there, and they end up staying with them, and they're hanging out. Tom, the bard, basically says, "Look, Matt appears to be channeling. He has the look of someone who's done it, and the madness is setting in. I've seen it with my own eyes before. I think that's what's happening. Now we know he has a cursed blade as well. Could it be both things or one? Who knows? But we know that Matt is not well, and he has a cursed blade. Um, so the family is slaughtered. They're all dead. They go in the house. Matt sees a fade. Badass little quick fight. The bard can fucking go. We have a cool little scene, and Rand and Matt escape. Now, the thing that's being discussed and contemplated online is, did Matt just stumble in there because of the fade, or did Matt do something bad? Um,
That's what I was wondering.
that's a discussion. I'll say that that whole sequence is not. It's different, and so people are very much not sure what any of that meant.
I I personally think that he was fighting whatever was taking over him to try and get him to do that, and perhaps whatever the fade was killed those people, and he was in there fighting basically the possession or whatever. The only reason I say that is because of his two little sisters. I think that unless they plan to Andrea this character and just like completely
Oh,
make it different and kill him off, there is this would be a character defining moment that would make him complete, because like I said, I'm only 5 chapters into the book and he's like this lovable prankster, and he's always playing jokes and like all this stuff. So for it to go from that, now I understand it's a cursed knife and it could do many different things, but I think that knowing that he killed kids that were the same age as his little sisters would fucking destroy him. And I don't think that that would be something his character could come back from. And that's why I don't believe he did it.
Yeah, and you have a point there because that very much seemed to be the character that we saw in the village. That he was more of an upbeat person who clearly cared a great deal about his family, in particular his sisters, and and if anything, it's hard to believe that he did that, or if it did happen, it was solely just the knife possessing him. And in fact, speaking of the channeling, when he's like, "Oh, Matt's channeling," um, that scene made me think. I'm like, I don't think we've seen Matt channel yet. I think Matt's like the only person we haven't seen channel yet. So you know, like what does he do when he channels? I don't think it's this. I think that's just a knife possessing him. Or if he has any like major channeling ability like the others, I think it's just more, like maybe the knife exploits that somehow, in some
and
way.
and unless they're doing, and this is it's a slight book spoiler, but not really. I'll say this: if you get stabbed by that knife, your body doesn't look like the way they looked. So
Oh,
that
okay.
that was my immediate thought. I was like, he didn't kill. If he killed him, he didn't kill him with that knife, unless they decide to change that, and that was another thing because they have changed some stuff. So they could change. It's not all. It's not, I page to screen. Complete accurate. So I don't know.
So the knife does something similar to what I was alluding to.
Yeah, you don't want to be cut
Okay.
by that.
Okay. All right. But
You don't
yeah,
want to hold it, and you don't want to be cut by it.
but yeah, I think Matt is, too good to consciously do that. Like he couldn't have been in any of control of himself at all to do that. Like Spencer said, like and if anything, that may be the only reason he's able to like control that knife if he can, is because his nature is that good.
we ended the episode where, there was a lot that happened. Like I said, we have Logain has been gentled. We have, they defeated that army. We have a dead Aes Sedai. That's a big deal. We have, they're all headed to the tower. We now have Rand and Matt running. They've been separated from the Bard, and Perrin and Egwene are still with the little crew, and they're heading their way too. Where do you think there's how many more episodes? I think there's only 9 episodes. This was 4. So where do you see episode 5 going? Or what do you think needs to happen in episode 5? Better question.
I think if either, and I don't mean this like negatively, the I think they need to wrap up the Perrin Egwin story as far as being with the gypsies, the leaf people, or either wrap it up or imply some importance more in it. Because, like we said earlier, I think that having Perrin basically be torn and like be contemplating this, after he killed his wife, and then feeling he's very pacifist. He wants to be a pacifist. I understand kind of why they're tying this in, but to me, I know they're trying to build characters. They're trying to give us a story, but it feels like they're dragging out a character story. When I think I think it's Egwin, right?
Yeah.
Egwin.
Egwene or Egwene.
Egwene.
Yeah.
Egwene, that's right. But when you have her character that I feel is like one of the most, her and Nynaeve are very similar as far as the importance that they hold to the group. And I feel like Perrin is, whatever his path is dragging her story, is slowing her story down as far as vision. And they need to wrap that up or all back
I
up.
agree in that the last 2 episodes, her story, the brakes were pumped because she started, she was our first sort of major character. We had her little ceremony, and there was a lot of important things with her. And then even going into when Moraine is showing her some things about her abilities. And then you're right, in the last couple episodes, she's just sort of been there. So I would agree. Yeah, her story of all seems to have stalled out a little bit.
That's a very good point. I guess we need to establish what her story is, well before the season is over. Hopefully in the next couple of episodes, we get some idea of that. And as far as the Perrin being a pacifist thing, that works in some shows for some characters, but given this, I don't know if it'll work completely, especially given the abilities we've seen with him. Because it would just be a little silly for him to go, "I'm a pacifist now," and he's sicking wolves on people.
The berserker druid to suddenly be a pacifist.
It's like, I don't kill anybody; just these wolves kill people.
What do you, what do y'all think? And let's just talk broadly about it in terms of like the lore and how the show is doing. So, I've kept tabs on a couple major YouTubers that follow Wheel of Time, like that's their thing. And there's even with this episode, which a lot of them enjoyed, some had some issues. The general consensus seems to be 7.5. Like it's okay. Like that seems to be the grand like consensus amongst the hardcore fans, or at least the ones watching it, and the general public. Now we know it had a huge successful debut. Amazon came out and said it was one of the biggest launches they've ever had for a new show. So that's positive. But if it's lukewarm reception throughout the season, and that let's say they make some radical changes and it irritates the fans. You know what I mean? Like I am worried about that as well. Like how much are they going to change? You have to change certain things. You can't you just can't do it exactly the same. It's 14 fucking books. But at the same time, those changes need to make sense, and it needs to not I don't want to use the word disrespect, but it doesn't need to cause an issue for the overarching storyline. And I can name shows that have failed. And you think about Walking Dead or even Game of Thrones, started great, and then the further they just sort of said we're not worried about the source material, it sort of goes off the rails because you're no longer, when you ignore the source material, it's basically the showrunner writing fan fiction to some degree.
Well,
Yeah.
And
and I think too, when a book series, especially Wheel of Time, it's 14 books. It's there's a game plan from start to finish. There's a big outline. There's even when Sanderson took over, he basically took over Jordan's notes and wrapped it up. There's an end game. So when you give somebody freedom to stray from the source material, it ends up, all the foreshadowing and stuff ends up not mattering or point you in the wrong direction or being like a red herring, which is not the intent. And I think that was the problem with Game of Thrones. All these foreshadowing and all these things ended up in that final season not meaning shit, and that was the irritant to me. But I think the way they explained the Wheel of Time is that it's basically the cycles reborn over and over and over with the same people, basically, generations later. So if they explain it to where this is maybe a slightly different generational passage of time, or this is, instead of being the third age, the second age or the fourth age or whatever, I think that they could probably change a few things, and then have it, kind of carry through, and also get rid of, and I don't mean that like negatively, like Jordan wrote a bunch of minor characters, but even in Game of Thrones, there was little characters that didn't show up. Harry Potter, there's several small characters that translate well to books who just kind of pop in and out. But when you have to cast that, it becomes a hindrance. It becomes, extra scenes that you got to put in. I can understand them not, leaving out certain characters or handing the reins of a small character to one of the major characters. I could understand all that. But like you said, if they completely go off the rails a little bit or start straying from the source material, I needed an explanation as to why. And the explanation, it needs to make sense.
Oh, absolutely. And it's the sort of thing where, like you said, you have you 100% you have to, like, just to fit it into a television show. You're gonna have to cut some things, especially given how many books this is. But you got to maintain those core ideas of what the show's about and how it ends and why certain things happen. But every minor detail isn't 100% important, and I'm sure diehard fans will disagree. But it's like either you want a close adaptation that is satisfying and completed, or you want adaptation that's spot on, and maybe you get 1 to 2 seasons and it never really gets past the first book.
Well, and we talked about it right before we started recording, how I'm 5 chapters in and they didn't even make it to the winter party yet in the book. So that's like half hour into the first episode. So uh it's one of those things where he is Jordan is so descriptive, and we were joking, talking about Rand's eyes. It was like they were the color of gray, blah, and it's like a paragraph describing what he looks like. And in a TV show, you can spend about a half a second and you just see it. You can set a mood with visuals and music and everything else. So there's chapters that are just chapters worth of just descriptive words that they can get rid of because they can just show you. So I don't think that they need to have, 14 seasons to basically explain all the books, but it needs to at least be several.
it
Right.
says right here, I knew this was a high number. I just looked it up. The Wheel of Time has 2,782 distinct named characters.
Good God. There's
Yeah.
no way you put all that in a show. No,
It's
you
because
could never.
it's mad, and like I said, I know in the latter books, it gets massive, and
But I think those even distinct name characters, even in the book now, they like name the mayor. Rand's dad is named, and all these characters aren't
yeah,
necessarily important going forward, but they're all named characters that play a role in that small part. So when you talk about 2000, I've already heard probably 8 names that I've already forgot because they're not one of the main, 7. Because I'm just like, oh, well, they're not going to be important here too much longer. So I think that out of those 2000, you probably only need about 100 of those to be. And I don't mean that like negatively towards the book. I just mean as far as casting goes. You could, basically cast somebody for one episode and they're basically paying them as an extra. Kind of like Ed Sheeran was an extra in Game of Thrones for like a half a second. He wasn't a major character, but he just, and they kind of waved at him and said his name and just kept going. I think that you don't need 2,000 characters to make it.
Speaking of the books, though, I was, I'm real curious whether this is roughly the amount of time that Logain had in the books, also, or was he around a little longer? Because when they did the setup for this guy, I assumed that, oh, okay, this is going to be a villain, at least like throughout the majority of the book. In fact, maybe hunting, like our main group, because and considering them to be false dragons, and them coming to their own would be them defeating Logain. That's what I thought was going to happen. So it's like I'm very curious what they're up against later, and whether Logain had uh, more pages like dedicated to what he was doing and what he built in the books.
Yeah.
Wait. Before you go, we've made the comparison to Dragon Age. Logain was one of the bad guys in Dragon Age.
Yeah. Yep.
I just remember, like, when we kept saying his name, I'm like, God, that sounds familiar. So I just looked it up and I was like, motherfucker.
We made a lot of little comparisons, and we're seeing a lot of little things that they lifted here and there. And Logain also in the books also helped, I believe, establish a kingdom. Well, not in the books, but in Dragon Age, establish a kingdom, and you know, and form armies and whatnot. So yeah, I guess there was a lot of inspiration.
Yeah, I can say there's a lot of, so even like, yeah, you get into like book spoilers. I'll just say that they've made changes. I'll say that with certain things, and move things around, and it's not. I mean, I, yeah, I'll say
Well,
that.
well,
But
that goes towards my.
Logain's in the books, and he's not just in the first book. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, all right.
I assumed he'd be in more. I just didn't know what his role would be going
Now,
forward.
whether or not in the show they again, are they going to change some stuff with that? I don't know. But yeah, he's not just in the first book.
Well, my question here too is like, he's been gentled, of course, but is there is there a chance that he could get those powers back in some way and still be in the show like that? That maybe that's a thing that's possible. I'm not sure if that's canon to the book or not. If he's in the show, or maybe he's in the book this way. Well, I'm guessing you're alluding to no, he's not gentled, at least not this early on in the books. Um, so
A
it just
lot
seemed
of
like a really interesting
a lot of the
character.
things that, like I said, a lot of things that happened were different. But yeah, he's but that's the thing about this series. There's so many important people that you haven't even met. Um, it's just it's a lot. It's a lot going on, man. I mean, there's a lot going on. Um, but yeah, in terms of this particular episode, that's about all I really had to say. I was all over the place because I really didn't know where to start, and it was one of those. It's dense. That's the best way to describe it. It's dense, and it's a lot. My biggest fear with this series is it's catered too much to fantasy fans and D&D nerds, to the point where I don't know if it crosses over. Like Game of Thrones crossed over. People watch Game of Thrones that don't give a shit about D&D, fantasy games, RPGs, whatever. People, like, just general public watched Game of Thrones. I don't know if this show is the same or could be the same.
It's very lore heavy, it seems.
I think it could be. I think what they just need, and not to be, I think what they need to do is focus on the questioner a little bit. And I don't mean that like I want to see a bunch of a bunch of people die, but I think that's, episode 1 of Game of Thrones. Spoiler alert: Rand Bran gets pushed out of a window. That's like episode 1. So you already have the intrigue, you already have the politics, you already have all these things built up from episode 1, and I think that, and I know that that kind of stuff is in Wheel of Time. The bad versus good, these guys versus they need a little bit of that gray area, and I think that Tom the bard is that gray area, and if they focus a little bit on him, you give a character who can draw in some of those people that can kind of cross over. And I think if you focus the questioner just being in for such a short period of time, I think that refocusing on him momentarily will kind of draw that crowd back in because it gives them a different uh, reason to watch.
Well, yeah, I think I agree with you because it's like there seems to be a new threat every episode or so, but it's a new threat that also has to be explained, and it may help to be something to see something that's been established that people understand right away. The questioner, immediately when you hear questioner and you see what they're doing, you think, Inquisition. So you understand this threat, and it's one that would continue from episode to episode. Whereas, potentially the problem with this is, whenever we meet a new adversary or something, be it Logain or the woman from the inn, or what have you, that adversary is, taken care of. You're like, oh, that's a cool enemy for them. Um, it's taken care of in that episode. There's not exactly a through line, and having that
It's
continue
almost
on.
been like enemy of the week.
Yeah,
You're right. It
And I
structurally it sort of has been.
and I understand that they're trying to basically build a world. Like the Trollocs aren't gone, the Fade's not gone.
Nope.
Like all things aren't gone. They're just trying to introduce us to too much, and I think they could still do that, but still have that underlying like main villain, whether it be and you see that because you have the faceless Fade guy who's coming around in their dreams and everything else. But if you want to get some of those crossover things, people know what happened in the Inquisition. Like that's not, or even the Salem witch trials. Like there is things that people can relate to without having to know fantasy when it comes to the questioner. Like
Mhm.
that is something that people can relate to historically without having to believe in magic and dragons and like all this, goblins and all these D&D type things where the questioner is something that is very real to historically accurate things that have happened. So I think that that would be able to kind of pull some of those kind of people in.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's why that works so well. Uh, that's what I was thinking too. And when I saw that character, I instantly wanted you understood that character and wanted to see more with with the questioners and this whole order.
Yeah. On that note, anything else regarding the 4th episode of Wheel of Time?
Well, I
No.
just want yeah. All I got is that like so far understanding how their world works and the lore. I think I'd be on the side of the dark one, man. I don't know if I'd want to redo some of this stuff. Like I gotta mess up my knee at 14 again and get kidney stones at 16 again. Just
um,
it's like I'd rather not.
all right. On that note, yeah, we'll see y'all next week with another review for episode number 5 of Wheel of Time. Appreciate everyone listening, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.